Today we have the Executive Director of DC Young Democrats, Chynna Dickerson, with us to discuss the next step for the Democratic Party. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, thank you for having me.
So can you just start off by telling us a little bit about what you do for DC Young Democrats?
Sure, so I am, I guess you would say, describe it as like a chief operations officer with DC Young Democrats, which is a chapter, a state chapter of the Young Democrats of America, which is essentially an arm of the Democratic Party. So for example, you have the Democratic Congressional Committee, the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, you have the College Dems, and then you have Young Democrats, which goes from ages 18 to 36.
Awesome. So right now people feel like the Democratic Party doesn't necessarily have a lot of power or a voice right now in Congress. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I think people are a little bit disturbed and don't feel as represented, particularly because technically we are in the minority in Congress and in the Senate, and of course we have our Republican President Donald Trump. I think that even within state legislatures, we're seeing a shift to more Republican states, and so we're trying to get that, have the majority be more Democrats, even on the state level. Similarly, with mayors and with city council members, we need to get more Democrats in office. And so I think with a numbers game, folks are correct that they are not being represented. We even saw with Gorsuch, because the Republicans are in power, then the Democrats really didn't have what they needed to make sure he was not confirmed to be on the Supreme Court.
And what do you think is the most important thing for the Democratic Party to focus on right now?
I think there needs to be more of a focus. Some would disagree. Senator Bernie Sanders has said that he thinks that the Democrats are play too much into identity politics. But I think that's what Trump, if there is something he did well at identifying why people were upset and then speaking directly to those issues. For example, jobs. A lot of his platform was getting jobs, bringing jobs back from overseas, and so he very well played into identity politics. And I think Democrats are stepping back from that, and they need to talk about the issues that affect our communities the most.
And what issues do you think they should be focusing on?
So I think similar to what won for President Trump, jobs, middle America, because I think whether they are right or wrong, they feel left out of the process. I also think, talking more about the folks who are the most oppressed. So women, people of color, people with varying sexual orientations. We really need to address the troubles that are facing those of us who wouldn't be considered part of the majority.
And how do you think is the best way to address those people?
So I think what the Democrats have not been doing well is talking to those folks, getting into those communities, really hearing from them, and not just, for example, during a presidential cycle, attending a black church or going to a pride march, right? Like, you have to consistently engage the people in these communities. You also need to hire people who look like those people, who have a similar, are living a similar experience as those people, to be your political operatives, to help you with planning and strategy. And I think the Democratic Party, while headed in that direction, is not quite there yet.
And there have been a number of predictions for the 2018 Senate election outcome. From your perspective, what are the next steps that we can take for the Democrats to feel like they have more of a representation?
I think the biggest thing we need to do right now is focus more, which is some of the work I do in my everyday job. So DC Young Democrats is more part-time for me. I'm also a political strategist, and I work to secure and to protect the rights, reproductive rights. And I think what we Democrats have not been doing is building a pipeline on the local, the statewide and local level, so that we have good crop to run for the Senate, the U.S. Senate and U.S. Congress. So I think one of the major things we can do is build up that baseline, build up that pipeline, so we have good folks to run. Right now, we don't have enough women, we don't have enough people of color, we don't have enough people from these, different backgrounds, as I stated earlier, ready to run in 18 and ready to run in 20. So we have to get those folks prepared. Otherwise, the Republicans have this long pipeline of folks to run, and we'll see them winning again.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been 7 years since the Affordable Care Act was passed. Protesters gathered to voice their opinions on health care. Amaya Turner has more on the story.
Grassroots organization Vocal New York is rallying against the repeal of Obamacare, led by President Donald Trump. Protesters marched from President Trump's hotel to his new residence on Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House. 11 countries currently offer universal health care. The United States, however, is not one.
It's time for change. Universal health care is a right in all the other major countries. Why not us?
Protesters are frustrated with the uncertainty of how this will affect their access to affordable health care.
Don't pass this bill.
Organizer Alyssa Aguilera says a repeal of Obamacare will force families to make difficult financial decisions.
We need to save our health care. Don't take cuts away. Our lives are on the line.
It's been 7 years since President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law. Protesters today are hoping that families will still receive the same access to affordable health care. Amaya Turner, Washington.
In Kansas, Democrat James Thompson is running a fundraiser to fill the House seat left open after appointee Mike Pompeo. Thompson is a civil rights attorney and Army veteran and has raised over $240,000 since Thursday. Thompson has called this a victory already, being that Kansas is a highly conservative state. Republicans are also pouring money into the race, while Democrats are looking to other conservative districts in Georgia and Montana to test anti-Trump enthusiasm in the future.
Pressure grows on Alabama Governor Robert Bentley to resign after the discovery of a year-long affair between him and his political advisor. Alabama's Ethics Commission found that Bentley had broken state rules by using his political position to cover up the affair. Impeachment hearings began today, and Bentley has begun negotiations to plead guilty and step down from his position. Bernie Sanders announced a bill that would make tuition free at public colleges last week. The College for All Act make public colleges free to students whose family income is less than $125,000. It would also get rid of community college tuition and cut student loan interest in half, if passed.
Hashtag DC Missing Girls is now a household phrase. More attention to the problem of missing girls in DC was lifted to the national debate with the popular hashtag. Our Kelvin Henry reports.
Hashtag DC Missing Girls exploded on social media this past month. The Missing DC Girls story has shown Washington, D.C.'s not-so-secret divide along racial lines and between the haves and have-nots. Celebrities are showing attention to a long-standing problem and lack of attention for missing Black and Latino girls. The one problem is the problem is not getting worse, but more attention is shown on the topic, which many believe is a good thing. American University law professor John Watson believes social media has both a positive and negative impact on issues. Professor Watson also believes a positive impact of social media is that it shows what journalists often miss in the minority communities.
Journalists learn that they very often miss the problems in minority communities because they just didn't know about it. It's not that they didn't consider it important, they just didn't know.
Professor Watson also believes the negative impact of social media is that it sometimes makes a problem seem to be bigger than what it really is.
I don't want to minimize the importance of one missing, but social media have portrayed it as a bigger tragedy than it is.
Many believe the problem of missing girls of Black and Latino descent receiving more attention is long overdue, but they don't want this issue to fall out of the public's attention without being solved. D.C. educator Kania Krumlin believes even though the numbers haven't increased, that shouldn't be the focus.
I think when people focus on numbers and it's really about people, I think that's when it becomes problematic. I think if the story is about a person and their safety, like that's what the story should be about. It should not be about, oh, the numbers don't show that this is important. It's important because it's a person's life, in the story.
D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser says the numbers are not rising, but the Metropolitan Police Department is doing a great job bringing the issue to the forefront while letting people know it is not a rising issue. Kelvin Henry, District Wire News.
Coming up, we take a look at how journalism is changing in the Trump presidency.